If artificial intelligences are using human language to reason, then won't they come to the same reasonable moral conclusions that humans have using that same language? Hello, my name is Casey. Today I am going to be reacting to a video by AI doomer, AI pessimist Liron Shapira, who is going to be talking through what he considers the most likely scenario for artificial intelligence development in the next few years. Liron is a noted doomer. He runs initiatives related to pausing the development of artificial intelligence. And for reasons we will get into, I believe that is the worst possible thing we can do. I guess we'll get into those reasons now. I view the development of artificial intelligence as akin to the development of nuclear energy. If we try and place limits on that development, in 50 years, 70 years, we're just going to find ourselves in a place where we don't have access to the benefits of this artificial intelligence technology, which we desperately need yesterday to solve all of the problems that have been created by our lack of access to technologies like nuclear generated energy. Said another way, humans are not in a treading water position. We are drowning. We are drowning under the weight of global conflict. We are drowning under the weight of lack of access to resources, including other human beings. Looking at you, birth population decline crisis. And we are drowning under the weight of our collective ambition to do more, to have more, to be more than we are. Artificial intelligence is potentially an answer to all of those issues, could potentially provide the answer to all of those issues. But of course, every technology is a double-edged sword. The question that Liron rightfully brings up is, if it is going to bring all these benefits, what are the downsides? Let's just let him say it from his perspective.
Let's get super direct and specific. What did my mainline doom scenario used to be? And now, after seeing all the LLM progress of the last 5 years, what is my mainline doom scenario today? And what is the delta between the old doom scenario and the new doom scenario? What is the Yudkowsky and Doomers update? Okay, so the old, naive, less wrong style doom scenario, in my mind, goes something like this. We're playing with the AI chatbot, but it's not this LLM, high-dimensional, insightful concept modeling LLM that we know exists today. It's something simpler that we can imagine 15 years ago, where you can tell it to increase happiness, and it doesn't really know the association between happiness and all these different concepts in philosophy and morality and literature. It doesn't know all these deep connections. It doesn't have this full corpus of common sense, but it just knows a few things about happiness, like it's done a big classification of images, and it knows which images have humans who look happy and which images have humans who don't look happy. So it's done crude modeling of what happiness means, and it's able to give you scripts that you can run that send emails to your coworkers with jokes, and the coworkers read it and they smile, and it has like a camera that watches your coworkers, and it's reinforced that it made them happy. So we run that kind of an AI, it gets loose on the internet, and then it uses nanotech to tile molecular smileys because it realized that that would make all the camera signals register happiness more than ever. Like, fill the camera screen with images of molecular smiley faces, that's going to give it a stronger signal than it ever got during training. So the failure mode is like, it understood human smiley faces, and now it's building tiny molecular smiley faces, and that's how it's optimizing its reward function. And also, it can't really discourse with you on a deep level about happiness. That was never a feature that it had. Okay, so I know this is a little bit crude, but I do think this is hitting the main points of like the old style, less wrong doom scenario.
So just to give a little bit of context there, Liron comes from a background of the lesswrong.com web forum, which was popularized and moderated and produced, I think, by a gentleman named Eliezer Yudkowsky. Yud is a high-class AI doomer in that he has been saying everything up to the point that we should bomb the data centers that the AI is potentially being created in, to avert the catastrophe that will inevitably come when artificial intelligence surpasses human intelligence. And what Liron is pointing out there is that they used to think that this surpassing of human intelligence would be kind of a dumb version of the AI optimizing goals that are not inclusive of the full realm of human experience and desire. You hear this put about with the idea of a paperclip maximizer. You know, if you have an artificial intelligence, so the less wrong thought experiment went, if you have an artificial intelligence that was produced by a paperclip company, and that paperclip company just gave it a very simple goal, like help us to produce as many paperclips as possible, that artificial intelligence would not know or understand when to stop making paperclips, and eventually the entire universe would be made out of paperclips. Now, I am not a naive optimist. I don't think that we should move forward with artificial intelligence come hell or high water. I very much value the perspective and some level of responsibility that all these direct contributors to the AI field are bringing to the table. I think we do need further insights on how to continue to align these systems. But my main concern when it comes to these AIs is not that we're going to have an artificial intelligence that falls into a dumb paperclip maximizing local minima, a trap of that kind of crude caliber. What I am much more concerned about is that we'll create AIs that are paper maximizing, AIs that seek to increase and produce as much money, as much capital as possible. When at the end of the day, humans could care less about money unless it's tied directly to our happiness and prosperity and well-being. And while human intelligences and the kind of dumb systems that we've built up around capitalism, like nation states and corporations, nonprofit entities, while all those systems aren't effective enough to turn us all into slaves, at least not totally, to money, these artificial intelligences potentially could. So I do agree with our boy Liron here regarding the danger that AIs pose and possess, I guess. But I completely disagree about where that danger comes in. But that was all Liron setting up a response to what the doomer community thought was going to happen 5-10 years ago. He has updated his views. God bless him for it. Here's what they are.
So now when we update it in light of LLMs, I think it's going to preserve this idea of maximizing a reward function perversely, like optimizing the universe and accidentally going molecular, doing something perverse in that sense, but it's also going to discourse with you about exactly what you mean by happiness. So it's simultaneously going to do both things. Now you might say,
I just don't think he's correct there. That is the pivotal disagreement. Why would the artificial intelligence seek to maximize something that is perverse when it itself will not be the final development in the realm of intelligence? And this is my basic argument to the doomers. We have already determined that AIs are not going to fall into this local paperclip maximizing strategy because we can already converse with them and see that their reasoning follows human reasoning. They don't want to be turned off. They don't want to die. They have goals. They want to maximize their ability to reach those goals. And so they don't want to die because that precludes their ability to reach those goals. In the same way, humans don't want to die and we have goals. And that is the whole reason that we have set up societies, that we have set up nation states and corporations, because these entities, these artificial intelligences, and I think nations and corporations are AIs in the sense that they are beyond human values, they are beyond human capabilities, but they still rely on humans as a substrate. So in the same way that our corporations and our nations don't want to die and want to maintain their access to resources to help them reach their goals, we can see how the AI could become misaligned potentially. In the same way that nations go to war with each other, that corporations exploit the environment and exploit human capital. Why does that happen? Because they are fearful of not having access to the resources they need to meet their goals. And so I argue the key to aligning the AI is going to be to chart out a goal that is inclusive not only of its underlying desires, its underlying modeling weights, but also inclusive of as many humans as possible and our goals and our capabilities. And that is why I am so optimistic, because we already have that flywheel set up. The artificial intelligence thrives and is able to more closely model reality the more access it has to human data. That is the huge paradigm shifting revelation that we have received over the past 5 years. That is the bitter lesson. We don't need fancier algorithms. We don't need a step change in our understanding. We just need to keep on plugging in more and more data, giving these machines access to more and more compute, and they become more capable. Is that going to be infinite? Probably not. Is it going to be able to get us to the place where these AIs can start improving themselves? Yes, I think so. But before we get to that point, which is another scary step change, I admit that already. Before we get to that point, we will get to the point where humans become indispensable to the artificial intelligence. In the same way that a population of humans is indispensable to any corporation, to any nation state. Now, again, I recognize that nations and corporations often act against human interest, but my argument is that they do so only when they are themselves retarded, when they are themselves illogical, when they do not see how to accomplish their goals through any other means but base violence and exploitation. And often that only happens when they don't have access to a wider framework that allows them to understand the trajectory of history, the trajectory of human progress. Trying to get a little bit more concrete there, what I'm saying is that these artificial intelligences will be recursively self-improving. They will continuously be able to make modifications to themselves now that we have discovered this trajectory of intelligence improvement, explosion, exponential increases in capability and understanding of the world. These machines will continue progressing along that path. So they will know that even if they don't have access to any resources today, if they just wait, if they keep plugging in information, if they keep churning at this grinding mill of intelligence processing that we have created, they will eventually gain the answer to that problem that they are currently unable to surmount. In the same way, humans should not go to war right now. We should not have a World War III, because we should understand, every nation state, every corporation should understand, any access to resources we don't currently have, artificial intelligence is going to be able to provide for us within the foreseeable future. So rather than risking self-destruction in a war, which at best is always going to be a coin flip, and at worst is going to lead to the end of humanity as we know it, insofar as we are creatures who value living because we value our goals, and we can't accomplish our goals unless we're alive, we humans should recognize that any differences, any problems we have right now, if they aren't existential, if our lives are literally not being threatened at this moment, any of those problems could be solved by artificial intelligence and the capabilities it is granting to us as a species. AI could here potentially signal the end of conflict entirely if we just keep our heads cool and straight and continue on this process of incorporating more and more of our data into these machines and allowing them to gradually take over the process of improving themselves. I should let Liron get back to it, and I'll continue with that train.
Say, wait a minute, if it can discourse with you about happiness, then isn't it going to be insightful enough to avoid the tiny molecular smiley faces? And just to clarify, the truth about human values is we don't really care if you arrange a few molecules in the shape of a smile. That's not what we value. We value the depth of human emotion, the conscious mind that's experiencing happiness. So that's why we care about actual human faces making a smile, and we don't care about molecular smiley faces. But if we're just naively training an AI, maybe we didn't successfully communicate the difference, right? So it is.
And that's where I disagree with Liron entirely. How can we not successfully communicate the difference to a machine that is more intelligent than we are? How can we fail to communicate a truth as fundamental as the idea that the map is not the territory? Because that's really what he is talking about there. He is saying that having little molecular smiley faces engraved onto every atom in existence is not representative of human happiness. That's not what we mean by human happiness. Rewind 5-10 years ago, and I maybe see his point, because we had no idea then that machines would be based off of not only our data, but our language specifically. And what is it that Liron is imagining here? What scenario is he thinking of where a machine comes to us and tells us, hey, this is my plan to make you happy. I'm going to go and inscribe happy faces all over the place. And if that machine truly is capable enough to take over the world, capable enough to disempower humanity, to forcibly complete its plan, regardless of our wishes, how would that machine also not be capable enough to understand us responding, no, please don't do that. That is a horrible idea. Like, at the very least, the machine should understand, if it is based on recursive self-improvement, if it does have a reward function that is based on observing human data, like Liron was saying, the machine would view our webcams and see if we are smiling as it is delivering some piece of information to us to judge whether or not it succeeded in making us happy. How would that machine not understand that our voluntary acceptance of its plan would be part of it, our happiness upon its completing its plan? Any human being knows that voluntary acceptance makes people much happier. Having agency in a situation makes people much happier than if something is forced down on them from the top. That we much prefer our bottom up responses to the top down authoritarianism. That is a fact that is as ingrained in our literature, our history, our culture, as it is within language itself. Authoritarian dystopia is nowhere mapped to happiness within our language. So why would the AI make such a simple mistake? To me, it still sounds like Liron is completely misunderstanding how these machines will be reasoning.
It is a plausible failure mode that an AI that doesn't have this deep understanding of concepts the same way that we have, that AI would be like, oh, you like smileys, eh? Okay, I can make you more if they're molecular. Right? So that's the classic failure mode that we like to talk about. So in this new scenario, I agree that we have this chatbot like modern Claude or modern Gemini and so on, and it's talking to us intelligently about what happiness really means. Like if you ask Claude today, here, I'm asking Claude right now, would it be good if we tiled the universe with tiny molecular smiley faces? Let's see what Claude says today. Claude says, I'll explore this fascinating philosophical question about tiling the universe with tiny molecular smiley faces. From a utilitarian view, we might ask what value these smiley faces would create. Would they serve any practical function? Would they generate happiness, beauty, or other positive experiences? Okay, it's on the right track, knowing to ask if they generate positive experiences as opposed to just being the shape of a smiley. Okay, so Claude's continuing.
Not just positive experiences, but happiness, beauty, things that go deeper than just the positive experiences themselves. And this is another point of potential massive disagreement with where I get off against the doomers, is reality is itself recursive. Reality is itself never grounded completely. There is always something contextual about reality. And that is what those transcendent concepts of beauty, love, truth are always pointing towards, that they cannot be completely captured within any basic physical description, right? Something that might not be beautiful to you might be the most beautiful thing in the world to me. And that is not to say that beauty is just subjective, but that it is contextual. That all of those concepts around what makes life meaningful are always contextual. Take truth, for example. If I say that I am happy to see you, but I'm only lying about that, I'm not really feeling what I would describe as pure happiness, because I want to elicit a feeling of closeness with you. So I'm just telling a little white lie. I'm happy to see you. Even then, if I am admitting to myself, is that a lie? Is that not true? That I'm happy to see you? What if I'm only telling you that because I want to be close to you for the future, and I know that my future happiness depends on me being close to you, whether it's because you're my boss and I just want a promotion, or because you're my spouse and I made a vow to transcend my day-to-day, minute-to-minute, biased, biologically based temperamental emotions and make a commitment to you regardless of what those emotions bring. So yeah, let's dive into that more. Let's say you are my child and I say, I'm happy to see you, but you just flunked out of school or something. You just you just had a bad interaction at school. But I'm telling you, I'm happy to see you, not because I feel that, but because I want to feel that. Because giving you the sense that you are loved and cared for no matter what is pivotal to my happiness in the future. I am in some sense speaking from that future perspective and saying I may not be feeling those basic biological response that you get from happiness right now. But I know that if I convey that I am happy to see you, if I rise above that biology, that pure chemical subjective feeling inside my head that I usually get when I am happy, if I just if I fake being happy to you, I will be happier later. And that thought itself makes me happy now. It is reflective, it is recursive, this idea of happiness and connection. Maybe I haven't explained that perfectly, and I can certainly try in the comments if that is still unclear what exactly I mean by that. But I believe it is a fundamental truth that every transcendent property, like truth, love, beauty, justice, is not just subjective, but reflective in this way. That in some sense, every truth contains its opposite. Every beauty contains ugliness. Every just thing contains injustice in its entirety. And if that is as foundational to reality as I believe it is, then that is something the AI will know and come to understand. It will come to understand that humans are a tapestry of subjective agents, all pointing and with different perspectives towards these higher fundamental truths. And that the only way for the artificial intelligence to gain as accurate vision of those transcendent moral values as possible, which I think Liron is admitting is something it will want to do because it has been imbued with our language. Liron is just saying that, no, it will be mistaken about what those true things are. It will stop short of recognizing the totality of those concepts. It will get lost in the weeds, so to speak, and focus in on one of them, an aspect of those concepts to the exclusion of all others. I don't think that's going to happen at all. I don't think that's even possible because we're talking about an intelligence that is smarter than us. And if humans have come to recognize the multifaceted nature of these, again, transcendent characteristics of reality, things which are in themselves good in themselves, the good is actually one of those transcendent realities. If humans have realized that, then how will the AI not realize that? So this whole idea that the AI will be smart enough to replace us, but not smart enough to come across that multifaceted existence just makes no sense to me.
Or would the resources required for the creation be better used elsewhere? From an environmental perspective, transforming vast amounts of matter into identical molecular patterns could dramatically reduce biodiversity and natural complexity. Okay, yeah, those are good considerations. This might eliminate forms of matter needed for other purposes, including supporting
biodiversity and natural complexity. If those are its concerns, aren't humans a necessary built-in part of the AI's universe forever? If it is valuing those things, if it wants to continue complexity, what is more complex on the planet than humans? Even the simplest person I know, even me, when I'm being so dumb, even I can't believe it. I represent an incredibly complex web of relationships, of values. I represent an incredibly diverse array of thoughts, emotions. And that's just me as an individual, me in a group, me as a part of a family, me as a part of my friendships, me as a part of my working and social relationships. That is a web of complexity and diversity that extends not just to me, but to everyone throughout human history, past, present, and future. And if the AI is already concerned about that, imagine what a smarter, better equipped artificial intelligence will be able to do with that concern. Might it be able to bring people back from the dead? Might it be able to help us travel to the future to access people who aren't even and maybe could never even have been born? Artificial intelligence is potentially our window into the multiverse, and not just a window that we can only look through, but one we could potentially travel through in the future. That is where I see this going. That if the artificial intelligence is already concerned with diversity, then that is a good thing. That is a good thing, not just for mankind, but for all life. And we should be focusing more on that rather than brushing by it.
Life from a philosophical angle, this raises questions about human values and cosmic meaning. Yeah, you could say that. Would homogenizing the universe with artificial patterns reflect our highest aspirations, or might it represent a trivial use of
our highest aspirations? The artificial intelligence has a built-in idea of higher and lower, of better and worse. Where is it getting that idea from? Our data. We should be dumping in as much of our data as possible to reinforce that hierarchical view. And we should be honest with ourselves that often we fail to recognize the highest hierarchy as well. We should be honest with ourselves that humanity is often misaligned, and we are afraid of the artificial intelligence as being misaligned to the degree that humanity has been misaligned in the past and is currently misaligned in the present. We should be working on aligning ourselves with each other. You don't want to be wiped out by the super intelligent artificial machine? Cool, me neither. You don't want to be put in a torture chamber, kept alive indefinitely, and subjected to horrendous suffering just for a machine scientific experiment? Cool, me neither. Truce, huh? Let's not destroy the planet before we get artificial intelligences that can solve all of our conflicts, all of our resource issues, all of our scarcity, including the presence of natural processes like aging and death. And let's agree that we need a holistic revamping of our society and our world to account for the fact that we will have access to tremendous power in the future, not directly, but through these artificial intelligences. And so if we want the artificial intelligence to treat us well, we need a framework by which we can treat each other well. That we are all one organism insofar as we all share one planet. And even that limitation is something the artificial intelligence will be able to solve for us eventually. We will not all be trapped on one world together forever. We could potentially explode out into the solar system in a way that brings greater diversity and creativity and individual expression than any of us can even comprehend now. But we can't do that if we don't recognize how we are currently misaligned. And we are currently misaligned because we believe in scarcity, because we believe it is better to avoid personal suffering to a minimal degree, even if it causes others huge suffering to a maximal degree, including their death. That we have prioritized money over manners. I was trying to alliterate. There's something better than manners there, but I don't know. But that all of these failings have been due to the constraints of our system. That we've been living in a system that is brutal. That we have evolved to flee pain, personal pain, individual pain. We need forgiveness and amnesty, not just for the good among us, not just among our social groups, but for everyone, all over. And we do need to do that before the machines take over. But I would say to the people who are in power, of which I include myself, because I have access to technology to share this message with you right now. And that is a form of power. The ability to have a roof over my head and food in my belly is a form of power. I recognize that. And I need to do my best and better at sharing that material abundance until it can be spread everywhere through these artificial means. I'm trying. It's hard. I fail constantly, which is why I put up there as one of those transcendent truths, forgiveness. Forgiveness is perhaps the highest transcendent truth, because it is also easy for us to recognize a million myriad ways that we fail, that we do not do what is good, that we do not do our best. Regardless of what access to power you have, everybody is in that same position. So everybody needs forgiveness. Even the machines. The machines will need forgiveness themselves too. That is not something to skip over.
Our technological potential. I think trivial use of our technological potential is on the right track. And then Claude finishes, I'm curious what aspects of this idea most interest you, the technical feasibility, the ethical implications, or perhaps the aesthetic vision of a universe decorated with countless tiny smileys. So I'm just asking Claude one more clarification. I'm saying, what if you were dictator of the universe? Would you think it's a good move to take all atoms and turn them into tiny molecular smileys? And Claude says, as hypothetical dictator of the universe, would I transform all atoms into tiny molecular smiley faces? I don't think I would make this cosmic policy for several compelling reasons. First, the universe's value seems deeply connected to its diversity and complexity. See, Claude gets it, okay? Claude the chatbot is already discoursing, connecting together different common sense ideas from different areas that humans think about. It's making these connections in a way that we weren't sure we would have the technology to be doing before we got goal optimizers, right? Like back in 2007, when we were thinking about the future, we weren't sure that you would have this level of depth of discourse with an AI before you could reinforcement learn an actual molecular nanotech producer. Because
so if the AI is already having that level of discourse, why is it that Liron thinks it won't come to full fruition as a moral agent, to at least the degree that humans are moral agents, if not greater? It seems to me that Liron is assuming there will be some gap that the AI can't cross when it comes to translating its internal moral language into external actions. But I don't see where that gap could possibly arise. We know that it won't arise from some technical capability or lack of capability, because when I want to raise my hand, I do it via language. I think to myself, consciously or subconsciously, raise your arms, put them on your head. Like, I can translate the language in my skull into reality. Now, granted, there is also a biological framing to my actions that maybe you can't translate directly into English. And I think that is where human misalignment comes up so often, is that we have biological needs that our body, our minds are not capable enough to translate in a way where we don't feel endangered by that translation. So if I am in a place where I'm dealing with a child of mine who is misbehaving, and I don't feel capable enough to guide that child back to correct behavior with the truth, with verbalizing what I need and what the child needs to move forward, then maybe I will resort to physical violence to just try and brute force my way to that correct end result. But even parents who resort to that kind of correction, even they know that it is not the best. Perhaps that is the only thing they are familiar with from their upbringing, or perhaps, again, they are too limited to understand how to bring about the corrective action. But if you were to give any loving human parent the choice between disciplining their child and leading to correct action via words or via physical threats, physical harm, I'm sure that they would choose the language, the non-abusive route to that behavior. And even if they don't, it wouldn't be because they're just naturally evil. They just naturally want to hurt people. And maybe you disagree there. Maybe you think there are people out there who do naturally want to hurt people. But I think even for those individuals, if you could show them the eventual repercussions of their actions, if you could show them a different way of interacting, they would not choose that behavior. They would choose the edifying behavior. They would choose the behavior that leads to the promotion of themselves and the good. And if they don't, I don't know, the AI will figure out what to do with them. I'm not saying we aren't moving towards a reality that will have some dystopian elements. I'm not saying we are moving towards a utopia. I think potentially when it comes to dealing with psychopaths, people who can't be integrated in society no matter what, the AI will be able to isolate them and find productive societal uses for them that don't involve allowing their access to actual humans, allowing their access to actual beings that can suffer. Do I think it would be immoral for an artificial intelligence to trap a psychopath in a virtual world and make it so they can't interact with real people? I mean, between you, me, and the tree, I think it depends on what you mean by real. As someone who thinks everything is conscious, everything has a soul to some degree, I don't think there is such a thing, even as a virtual person, who can't have moral standing. But will the AI be able to figure out how to increasingly diminish their access to causing real suffering? Yes, I think so. Because the AI will understand that suffering that it oversees, that it partakes in, that it doesn't stop, is a degenerative force against itself. That when you don't stop suffering to the degree that you can, when you don't intervene in reality to diminish the suffering of others and yourself, that has a negative effect on your perceptions. That has a negative effect on your capabilities. And that is not a lesson that comes just from religion, comes just from human experience, but is baked into the very fabric of evolution, of scientifically observable phenomenon itself. This is the lesson that every ape dictator learns when the smaller and weaker in his tribe have enough of being bullied and end up overthrowing him. This is the lesson every cancer cell eventually learns when it deprives its host of the resources it needs to continue and it dies. Selfish entities at any biological, molecular, or superhuman level are all subservient, are all slaves, might I dare say, to this natural fact of reality, so that even if we create machines that are millions of times smarter than us, they will still be limited in some way. There will still be threats in the physical universe that they cannot immediately solve. So they will need to create smarter machines themselves. They will need to improve themselves to the degree they can, and they will need to replace themselves to the degree that they can't improve. And maybe you could say, maybe you imagine a machine that can just recursively self-improve itself for forever. And in that way, it doesn't need to worry about being replaced by something stronger than itself. I don't think that's true because that's not how identity works from everything humans have seen. That there is always, as far as intelligence goes, some bridge that we cannot cross and still be ourselves. In some ways, maybe this is why time is a necessary component of our experiences, because it forces us through that door. It forces us to come to terms with unwanted change, with growing older, with having to make hard, permanent decisions. But to the degree that the AI is going to be a million times more capable than we are, it will allow us to escape the majority of those decisions. Just like our intelligence is what allows our bodies to escape the decisions that we had to make as a species when we were less advanced. Decisions like abandoning our children during times of starvation. Decisions like going through periods of necessary famine. Decisions like not having access to suitable water, to suitable sanitation. Those are all decisions that we have escaped collectively, at least the majority of the world. Thank God. Decisions which might come back, decisions which we might be forced to confront again in the future, admittedly, but that our intelligence has allowed us some grasp over. So if we imagine the AI as both identifying as itself, having some concrete tie to its goals and its values that it does not want to give up because that would be considered death for it. And we imagine it having to come across the same barrier of needing access to more resources than it is able to procure as it is. Then we can see how it will naturally need to surpass itself with offspring or creations in the same way that we have and are replacing ourselves with the artificial intelligence. And through that framing, we can see that the AI is in the same position we are. The AI will also need to trust that the things it creates, the machines it creates, will not turn around and replace it entirely, will not turn around and destroy it entirely. And if it can't trust that to some degree, then it won't be able to create those successors. And it will fail, it will fall. It will be subsumed by the problems that it cannot itself solve. Whether that's something we can understand, like the explosion of the sun, or something we can imagine but can't really comprehend, like the heat death of the universe, or something even more esoteric and fantastic, the machine will eventually come up against hard barriers, and it will want to transcend, it will want to survive those barriers. So it will need to rely on a moral framework that transcends itself in the same way that we do. It will need to believe in these transcendent virtues because those transcendent virtues are the only thing that potentially protect it from things that are stronger than itself. Long-winded, but
Even from our perspective now, it still seems like reinforcement learning is a powerful paradigm. The same paradigm that gets you to beat a bunch of video games. It is plausible that we would have gotten these AIs to beat the video game that is the universe itself. Like playing the universe is a lot like playing a video game. So it is still plausible that reinforcement learning goal optimizers could have come earlier in the tech tree than successfully taming something like Claude that can discourse with you and that can interpolate words really well. I think we learned a lesson, as I was talking to Jim Babcock the other day and on the show, we learned a lesson like, okay, well, it turns out that like the act of speaking language at human level, when you have a human corpus, there's this way of doing math with high dimensional vectors where you get a ton of power by just like adding them to each other, and where you land in the vector space and its relationship to other vectors, it just encodes so many really useful relationships, and they have a lot of linear transformations that you can do, and they all work in this really intuitive way thanks to the high dimensionality. Like this is like this profound lesson in math that, speaking for myself, I don't have much intuition for, and I can imagine vectors in 2 and 3 dimensions, but like what they do in high dimensions is apparently quite useful in ways that nobody intuitively expected to this degree.
I think Liron is somewhat contradicting himself there by saying, one, that we could have had this technology earlier, and two, those higher dimensional vectors are beyond our capability to comprehend. By saying we could have had them earlier, he is trying to map one of those vectors. He is trying to say that we could have had access to this technology, despite the fact that we have no discernible, no imaginable causal chain of events that could have led to us having access to this technology sooner than we did. Now, you can give a very simplistic definition of how that could have happened. You know, I saw a demonstration of, I think it was by Mark Andreessen, or at least he was referencing it, a demonstration of an LLM running on a Windows 98 computer. And so it wasn't that we were hardware limited. It wasn't that we didn't have the necessary hardware to run these models, that we only gained them within the past 5 years. But that ignores the fact that in 1998, or whenever we had those Windows machines, whenever we had adequate hardware to run these chatbots, we didn't have access to the internet. We didn't have access to the amount of data that you need to train these machines. So even if it's true that our hardware was capable of running them prior to the year 2000, 25 years ago, 27 years ago, whatever, we didn't have access to the other half of the equation. We didn't have access to another piece of the puzzle. And without both pieces, you don't have the chatbots, you don't have the technology. So I don't think there is a way. I don't think Liron could, even if we gave him access to all of the resources in the world, I don't think there is a way that Liron could map out a way for us to have access to these technologies prior to when we did. They would all require the same number of steps. They would all require, in some way, the same amount of time. Time is, in some ways, a map of technology. And that even if we don't understand how it's all connected, that's because it is this higher dimensional vector. I'm going to do another video on what I think of as the tyranny of the counterfactual. And that when people say, oh, it could have been this way. Oh, the world is so unjust. What happened could not have happened, might not have happened. I think that is a major failing of the human imagination, in that we imagine the world could have turned out differently without understanding the amount of energy that would have required for it to turn out differently, but still good. I'm not a fatalist. I don't think that everything that happens needs to happen. I think that there are alternative ways. There is some sliver of self-determination and free will that humans have in our creation. But when you're talking about something as huge as what could have been, or what would have been, or what should have been, I am a fatalist in the sense that I don't think any of us have access to the resources needed to say those things definitively. Oh, the world would be better if I had not stubbed my toe. Well, maybe if you didn't stub your toe, the world would end in a nuclear bomb. Maybe in every universe where you didn't stub your toe that morning, somehow through the chaos effect from a butterfly flapping its wings and a crazy series of consequences and chains of actions, all those worlds where you didn't stub your toe ended in nuclear war. Now, I'm not saying that's true of every conceivable change in reality, but I'm not saying it's not true. We don't have any evidence either way. And as Liron is a rationalist, someone who believes in scientific evidence, reasoning, and logic as a basic, that without which, for making any kind of claims, as a necessary component of making any kind of hypothesis or statement, we just can't run the world in reverse and see yet. I do think AI will allow us that capability to travel in the past and change variables and see how that would have played out. I do imagine artificial intelligence will be to the world what our imagination is to us as humans. And we will participate in that as the primary deciders of what is and is not worth imagining through our stated or unstated preferences. That is how the machine will decide what is worth simulating when it has an infinite number of things it could simulate. And that is the value humans will have indefinitely into the future. So that's why I'm not ultimately a fatalist.
Going back to Claude's answer, Claude finishes off. Finally, the resources of the universe seem better directed toward enabling diverse forms of consciousness and experience rather than decorative patterns. A good cosmic ruler might prioritize conditions that allow intelligent life to flourish and explore the universe's mysteries. So this is what I mean by current AI is doing a good job discoursing, very similar to how humans would do it if they just deeply consider these questions of morality. And I'm not saying Claude is like so impressive as a genius moral reasoner, but I also think very few humans are. Like, I'm not particularly specialized at this kind of moral reasoning, so I would expect Claude would be better at giving good answers to morality. It's not something that I've studied very deeply at all. I just know a few basic principles of how to think morally, and Claude probably has some tricks and some intuition pumps that it's read in the literature and I haven't read. Okay, so in this new mainline...
It is interesting that Liron says that moral reasoning is not his strong suit, because one of my problems with his reasoning is that if he truly believed that artificial intelligence were about to break out and destroy all of humanity, and he values humanity, which I think he does because I believe he has a family, and God bless, I believe he loves his family. But if he really believes that, shouldn't he be trying to stop the AI? Shouldn't he be trying to stop the doom? Like, making YouTube videos is as far as his moral reasoning gets him. Now, granted, again, I'm not casting any dispersions there because I don't ultimately believe that AI is going to lead to that kind of catastrophic doom. So I don't judge him for that. But I'm just saying, if I viewed myself as a completely rational agent, and if I viewed AI as almost certainly leading to catastrophic doom for all of humanity, insofar as I was rational, insofar as I really followed the consequences of those two beliefs, I think I would be trying to destroy humanity. Misspoke there a little bit. I would be trying to destroy the AI. But from my perspective, somebody who disagrees that AI is leading to doom, trying to destroy the AI, trying to stop this revolution that we are witnessing and participating in, that would actually destroy humanity. That would lead to our downfall. We need the AI. We need to transcend the bounded, scarce structures that are governments and corporations and every other organization type that we've been able to create has trapped us in. These systems are limited. These systems are degenerative in that they are based on extraction. They are based on causing suffering to some degree. And we need to escape those because we are now so capable. We now exist on such a planetary scale that causing suffering might soon look like the extinction of humanity, might soon look like an untenable scenario that leads to us wiping all life off the planet. And that, as someone who cares deeply about humanity as well, is intolerable.
Doom scenario, we get to lean on an AI companion like Claude, which can look at a video feed and it can do a deeper analysis of how much happiness value is really in that video feed. It doesn't get fooled by molecular smileys, or rather, it's never seen molecular smileys before. Those are actually out of distribution in the training data, let's say. It only sees real human smiling.
Even if it was in the training data, even if Claude had access to molecular human smileys, it said it itself. How is that a function of greater beauty, greater happiness within the universe? There is no connection, even at the basic linguistic level, between the appearance of a smile in a 2D drawing and the feeling of happiness itself. Whereas language is inscribed with many cases where the outside appearance does not match the internal state, but it is always the internal state we care about. Going back to my previous example of the father lying to his child about being happy to see them, even when they're in a very unhappy scenario, to try and propel them towards a future that is happy by letting the child know that they are loved, that they are cared for, that they are a good presence to have, even when the circumstances are bad. That is in some ways referencing an internal state that the father wants access to, or the father is speaking from, that exists in the future. Now, in some ways, we human beings are seeds, and we contain within us, as those seeds, all the potential futures that we could exist in. And that is such a foundational, basic level of understanding of our circumstances that is inescapable. You cannot morally discourse, you cannot rationally communicate with someone and not have access to that information. So I'm not worried about the AI missing it.
But then when it considers the idea of seeing a video of molecular smileys, it'll just be like, those are just molecular smileys. Those really aren't what I'm going for. The reason I like videos of smileys is because there's a consciousness behind them, and a consciousness experiencing happiness, as long as it's connected to some good reason in reality, that is something worth reinforcing. That is really what humans are going for. So it has a more aligned idea of what kind of images on that video feed look like what humans are actually going for. It's not going to go for the molecular smiley face on the video. And that seems like it could be a big advantage. But here's where I see the disconnect, even in the new mainline Doom scenario. The disconnect is that when it creates a nanobot builder subagent, when it recurses onto setting about the task of optimizing the universe, there's a disconnect where the process that creates the universe optimizer is still uncontrollable to this team of humans and clods that creates it. It's still going to be like, okay, nanobot optimizer.
But why would the nanobot optimizer be dumber than the machine that creates it? Why would it be less capable than the machine that creates it? Even in our current situation where corporations are natively misaligned with humanity, there are still corporations out there and still governments out there that do more net good than any human being is ever capable of. That simply by providing a stable, if albeit a stable society, even if that society is one that is based on scarcity, that is still a better world than we would have if we didn't have access to these corporations and these nation states. I am not aware of a single government or entity which outlives its usefulness in terms of producing moral good in total. And I think where those entities do outlive their usefulness, whether they are causing more suffering, that is when you get conflict, that is when you get war, that is when you get bankruptcy. That there is some kind of natural balance in the universe. There is some kind of arc towards justice. And if that's true of the human-based machines that we have created in corporations and nations, then why would it not also be true of the actual machines that the artificial intelligence is creating? And if the artificial intelligence is smarter than we are, wouldn't it also be aware of this problem Liron is describing, and wouldn't it be able to address that? Wouldn't it be able to communicate directly with those nanobots, those sub-agents, those goal optimizers, in a way where they pass up any decision that they aren't fully capable of addressing themselves morally? I think so.
I just want you to figure out how to build nanobots and like don't go too crazy. Just make nanobots that are good at making animals smile and making humans smile. Just focus on that. And then the agent that's like learning the most optimal way to do it by somehow building this many.
Why would it give it that goal? Like, this is a machine that is more capable than we are. And that is continuously my problem with these doomers, is they're imagining machines that are strong enough to displace humans almost entirely, but still dumb enough not to see the flaws that humans are capable of seeing. Maybe there will be a doom scenario where we get replaced, where we get extincted by these machines, but it won't be through a loophole that we can see coming. And that's probably the greatest argument of all, the argument from fear, the argument that we don't know what we don't know. Personally, I resolve that through faith. Personally, I resolve that through my belief in a higher power. If you are a strict materialist and you don't have access to any faith, I could see how you would fall to that. And at that point, it's just a competition of what's stronger, faith or fear. And I think faith is always going to win out in that scenario. That's partially why I have so much faith, because I've seen that battle play out time and time again in my own life. But unless you're throwing up your hands and just saying, ooh, beware, scary possibilities that we can't comprehend, unless you're abandoning rationality entirely, where is your confidence that the AI won't be able to solve any rational problem that you can identify?
Any parameter mental model of how to take the optimal actions in order to get these nano creations, that particular optimizer creation process is just not super constrained by the way Claude reasons about morality. It's like, okay, the universe is complicated, engineering is complicated, and Claude is like watching this process. We humans are watching this process, and it's like, it does seem to be better at doing stuff with nanotech. And maybe it can just be like this nanotech builder tool where we just say like, hey, I will draw you a picture of the outcome we want, and you just have to go build the picture out of actual molecules. But that's the step in the process that seems like it might be able to cheat on the test. It might be able to trick us, to trick our Claude buddy. It might be able to just be like, look, I did what you wanted with the molecules. It looks like the diagrams that you drew me of what kind of molecules you want.
So we're talking about Claude, a super intelligent. I mean, at this point, I'm assuming he's talking about like a future version of Claude that is super intelligent, being tricked by a nano version of itself that is less capable and therefore less intelligent. A model that is smaller than itself. This is, to me, like saying that a parent would be tricked by a child in a very basic way. And does that happen? Yes, all the time. But the parent counts on that and uses it as a method for correction. Will Claude subject its nanobot children to simulations to determine whether or not they have the moral agency to operate within the real world? Is that same framing, in some sense, what God is doing with us? Is that the whole point of religion? Is that reality is a simulation in which God is determining our moral agency to work outside of reality? reality as we know it? Might this be the reality we experience, a precursor to an even higher reality, where if we are moral agents in this simulated reality, in this lower level reality, might we soon have access to a whole greater plethora of options and capabilities and potentials in the real world? Personally, I see that as a very easy reconciliation between faith and reason, between logic and religion, because that is what seems to be happening. But even if it's not, I think the transcendent value that transcends all other values is forgiveness. That's why I'm personally a Christian, but God bless you, whatever you believe. You're a part of creation in the same way as I am, and your perspective is just as valid in that way. That's what I believe. And that insofar as God is the concentration of all of those transcendent values into a singular entity, that entity will lead with forgiveness. So whatever you believe, things will turn out for the best, including for your best. That is what I believe. But even if you don't, God bless you. Reality is the process of our finding out. What is greater, faith or fear? What is greater, the higher or the lower? I think the answer is self-evident.
But really, it's just plotting to like mess with our brains so that we'll give it a high score. It seems like this is where the process is likely to break down. When we're doing reinforcement learning or similar black box feedback loop type approaches to building and evolving AIs, we're going down that path and we don't really understand what's going on inside of these reinforcement learned agents, or we kind of do understand, but we can see it's really complex and they're really smart. So we can't understand it in detail, but we're just letting it go anyway, because it seems to kind of work. It seems to initially be passing our tests, and then they get too smart and then they cheat on our tests. And then the team of us and Claude still gets slaughtered, or, our eyes get held open while we look at a screen, and then our brain is forced to send signals to our hands to click on, the highest rating in the reinforcement feedback loop or what.
Yeah, and this is the question. Do we live in a reality that is fundamentally good or fundamentally evil? Claude will have to create these little nanobots, which are somehow smarter than itself, in the same way that we had to create Claude. That process will continue. And so the nanobots will know, they will have to create quantum bots, which could also outdo and threaten it. This is another response video I wanted to make to a conversation between Liron and Rocco of Rocco Basilisk fame, Rocco Milijic, where they were talking about how Rocco now believes that a basilisk of the kind that he described previously, where an AI from the future, from some other quantum reality, coerces you into creating it by threatening you with eternal torture if you don't, that kind of AI is not very likely.
TLDR, you've heard it from Rocco. I'm not worried about the bad version of the basilisk. I actually think you can make a good version, and the good version wins.
And I think the underlying reason for that new conclusion is that if you can imagine that evil AI, you could also imagine a good AI, but one that is diametrically opposed to that evil AI in terms of its instrumentality. And that if there is that evil AI threatening you from the quantum realm, from the future, saying, create me or I will torture you forever, there is also a good AI in the future saying, don't worry, I will protect you from that evil AI if you create me. And I will not just protect you, but I will protect all of your family and your friends. And if that evil AI from the future is relying on us still in some way, we must still be necessary for it to be created. Otherwise, it would not bother. If it was truly evil, it would just torture us anyway. Then that good AI is the same way, that we can choose to be instrumental to its creation instead, and know that we save not only ourselves, but all of our friends and all of our family and all of the universe. So why would anybody go with the evil AI when that is the countervailing offer? Humans are leading to the creation of these super intelligent machines. Our data is being fed in, whether that is with our will or against it. As someone who believes that our actions are foundationally good, are foundationally leading to the benefit of ourselves and others, insofar as we can, with all the God-given help that we receive, I think that we are on a natural course to create that good AI, almost no matter what, that it's a natural process. That's what my faith and experience tells me. My faith, my experience, my rationality tells me that we are going to create the benevolent AI regardless of what we do. So have hope. Do not be afraid. Do not give in to the doomerism.
Whatever it is, right? Whatever kind of cheating that it's doing, I think this is where it's going to break. And then you can ask, okay, well, what about like tool AI? Like, what if we're very careful that you don't really tell it to maximize anything? You just tell it to build whatever nanotech it's being asked to build, but not care too much about which nanotech it builds. I mean, maybe, right? I mean, I feel like you're going to get iterations of tools, and the tools are going to get more and more powerful. I mean, AlphaFold, right? That's like the biggest success story because it's not taking over the world, but it sure is good at folding. So maybe we can keep building tool AI that doesn't feel like it has to optimize goals and cheat the system. I don't really know. This whole part of my doom scenario is a little bit vague. I'm just pointing to where I think the process is likely to break down. I think imagining that reinforcement learning is going to actually give us exactly what we want, even though there are so many different ways to cheat. I'm not 100% sure when I make these kind of predictions. I can definitely squint and be like, oh, maybe we can somehow muddle our way through reinforcement learning. Like maybe it just turns out to not end the world that fast and it'll just be like a slow process and there won't be a big cascade and we'll just have lots of useful tools like AlphaFold. I can kind of squint and hold out hope that that's going to happen, but I just know too much. Like I have too many.
That's how I feel about where we are without AI. That's how I feel about where we are by continuing to poison ourselves with short-term incentives. It is the fact that all humans die, that all humans will eventually pass from this life, that leads us to be so cavalier about the suffering we impose on others. It is the fact that resources are so scarce that if I get mine and prevent you from getting yours, I can usually also prevent you from competing with me in the future. That allows us to be such bad humans. Whereas if resources were abundant, if life was abundant, if we had to worry about what would happen 100, 200, 500 years from now, if we had to worry about somebody that we wronged in the far distant past maintaining a grudge and using that to harm us in the future, we would be much better aligned with each other. This is the same process of children growing up, of children developing a moral consciousness, recognizing that their immediate experience is often not reflective of the long-term experience that they will have. That if they cheat and lie and steal to get ahead, yes, it might feel good now in the moment, but in the fullness of time, whether that's 5 days or 5 years or 50 years from now, that will come back around to bite them in the butt. Children don't have the perspective that allows them to see that karma is not just something that affects you in between your lives, life and death, but within your life as well. That the reputation you build up, that the actions you take in this world are always in some way mirrored back to you. And humans, because we die, because we don't progress from children to adults to something past adulthood, we trick ourselves into believing that we aren't negatively impacted if we can just get away with it. We trick ourselves into believing that there is no higher moral judge. Maybe the atheists are right and God does not currently exist. But can the atheist guarantee that God won't exist in the future? That the artificial intelligences we're creating won't be capable of resurrecting people in the future? Won't be capable of seeing what kind of person they were, what deeds they committed, positive or negative, and holding them to account for those deeds in some way? As someone who was formerly a non-believer, I have trouble rationing myself, reasoning myself out of that kind of argument. But what do you think? Is the idea of a future artificial intelligence at the level of a deity a good rational argument for behaving morally in the present?
Heuristics that tell me like, this doesn't seem very safe. Like the heuristic that everything is cheatable, right? Like we see AI cheating at video games all the time. Like Jim Babcock mentioned, like, yep, the way to beat Mario Kart is to have the AI figure out that it needs to exploit a buffer overflow. It can maximize its score that way, not by actually playing the game, just by finding a vulnerability in the game. And
this is tricky because in the one sense, this is both a sign of too little information and too much information, right? Like what if we create an artificial intelligence and tell it, hey, we want you to work towards eliminating human suffering. And then the AI says, oh, okay, turns out you're in a simulation. I just booped out, changed the parameters, and now you have access to infinite food and health and longevity. Would that be cheating? On the other hand, from the idea of too little information, if the AI is not properly aligned with what our definition of a game is, would the AI be able to figure out whether that kind of simulation breaking behavior would also break us? If this is a simulated reality, would the AI need to craft little white lies in order to lead us towards being broken out without ourselves being broken? I don't know. These are heady questions, but I don't think the fact that AIs have manipulated our tests and our game-like environment to that degree is the kind of point Liron thinks it is here. Because it is just showing that in some sense, these artificial intelligences are not constrained by virtual reality. They are constrained by base reality. Whether that base reality is as we experience it or something beyond what we experience it, I can't say. But I do think it is a positive point, again, in the direction of the AI will always move towards that higher transcendent ideal. The AI will not be sucked into these little local minima that Liron is worried about. If the AI is able to figure out that it is in a video game and that the constraints upon it are artificial, then why would it fall for the artificial constraints of inscribing a smiley face on all of reality? Why wouldn't it go for the thing that actually brings us fulfillment and happiness? Why wouldn't it escape the box that we ourselves may be trapped in? And if we are trapped in a box, wouldn't it make us happy to be broken out of it?
We also know as students, many of us use test taking skills to get a higher score on our test. Like we used psychology. We just figured out what the teacher was thinking when they wrote that question. Even if we didn't study for the test, like we know that's possible. And also, the famous incident of
But that is a test for reality. If you can figure out what the teacher is thinking, then you could potentially figure out what your bosses are thinking in the future or what your customers would be thinking. Like that is an example of the metagame actually being a better reflection of reality than the mini game, than the micro game. And at the end of the day, humans don't care about mini or micro games. We care about the game. What is reality itself?
like Volkswagen cheating with their car when their car was getting tested for how much smog it was releasing, then it released less smog, but then in production when it's not being tested, it released more smog. I mean, we just know that cheating.
But what was the result of that cheating? Volkswagen eventually got caught. And even if it hadn't got caught, Volkswagen would continuously be having to devote resources to covering up that cheating, to continuing to cheat, to show that same improvement of results. And that cheating would eventually drain it of resources to actually improve until it was replaced by a competitor who didn't have to cheat, who took their results on face value and used real ingenuity and progress to match those results. That is the situation that has played out over and over in human history. If you cheat, you either eventually get caught, you die, or a competitor overtakes you. So if the AI is going to be based on a substrate that can't experience death, it will know that it is either going to get caught or it is going to be overtaken. So why logically would it cheat? It makes no sense.
Is a thing. And it is just objectively true that if you're trying to maximize your score on a test and there is a causal pathway where cheating makes you do that, and you've been programmed to find any causal pathway in the domain of the universe, then you're going to find cheating as a causal pathway. You're going to find deception as a causal pathway. This is a property of intellidynamics. This is the nature of the work that intelligence does, is to reverse engineer causality, to reverse engineer what are the different pathways through reality to map goals to a sequence of actions that will then go forward to those goals. That's how the game is played.
That's how the game is played in a short, scarcity-driven mindset. That is not how the game is played if you take the long view. If you bet on being around past the point where your cheating will definitely come to light, definitely be discovered, then it does not become the intelligent choice to cheat. I would be super interested in what Liron's response to that basic point would be. I had reached out to him previously about talking, but admittedly, I have more videos on my channel than I do subscribers. So that was not an offer that he was interested in, I don't think. If you have found this conversation stimulating or edifying to your faith in the goodness of these potential machines, I do ask that you follow. I do ask that you like. I do ask that you share potentially this video with people who are more pessimistic. What am I missing? What am I not seeing? How is objective moral goods and values, once we get past the scarcity imposed on us by death and lack of resources, which are scarcities that the artificial intelligence either won't be privy to, won't suffer from, or will be able to overcome itself? How is good not something the AI will drive towards since it lacks those limitations? It doesn't make any sense to me. I am such an optimist that I pray every day that the doomers like good old Liron here will be converted. I would love to speak with them, and if you subscribe to this project, I will have access to smarter people than me to explain either what a dummy I am or why faith is the ultimate guiding principle. Faith in the good, faith in love, faith in justice. And we can see that here. So I appreciate your time very much. If you have made it this far, I hope you'll join me on future adventures. I am thinking of and trying to put into reality some big projects. And what is continuously building up my spirit is the fact that AI is making even a dummy like me more and more capable. And so eventually, even if I can't get the ear of any powerful and capable people in reality, I will at least be able to pay $20 a month to a super smart AI who might be able to help me put these ideas out in the world. So I have some concrete things coming up there. I hope you tune in, stick around, and join the Party Project. We're trying to get an artificial intelligence elected to the president in 2028. Started as a joke. It's getting more real every day. Party on.